The Zone Coverage Podcast Network.
They may be drinkers, Robin, but they're also human beings.
Hell yeah, let's get Stinko.
Once again, from the Burnsville studios, this is the Giles and the Goalie podcast. I am your host, Giles Farrell. Sitting next to me is Ben Remington.
Hello.
Ben, this is now 2 weeks in a row. You get to not wear pants to this podcast.
I've resisted the temptation so far, and I've worn pants, and I do regret it.
I should get a medal for this. But we have quite a show for you in store here, so we are going to jump right to the chase. But before we do that, we have a little bit of promo here for you. If you are not aware, this Otherwise Fine podcast is available to you via SoundCloud. I know a lot of you like to listen to podcasts via SoundCloud. You can find us there. You can find us on iTunes. If you do, certainly drop us an iTunes rating. We do like those. And we also have a YouTube channel. You can search Giles and the Goalie on YouTube, and you can find all our podcasts there. And you can also find our game previews and game recaps, where we do fun things like let our dogs pick the outcomes of certain games. So do look for us there. That is just a little bit of promo here for you. So if you're just finding us for the first time, do check us out there. Otherwise, for those who are continued listeners, thank you very much, and away we go.
You can find us in places where you can find aspiring amateur rappers and Logan Paul, so that's good.
All right. It was quite a newsworthy week for the Minnesota Wild, so we are going to go over some game recaps, and then we're going to get to some general topics of discussion from the past week, and we have quite a few of those. First, the game recaps. Tuesday, Minnesota finishing out their big swing against playoff teams. As I noted before that 4-game stretch started, I said the Wild need to get 5 out of 8 points if they want to be a playoff team. So they come into the game with 4 points, and they need one more on the road, and you kind of have that sinking feeling with the Wild's road play. They are not going to do good in this game at all, and they kind of did an about-face, and they won 6-2 over the Fighting Yos, which shocked all of us.
Yeah, that result was surprising. Just when you think you have this team cornered, I think that'll be the theme of every game recap this week, is that you think you know, but you don't know.
We never know. You don't know the story of the 2017-18 Minnesota Wild.
Right.
That closed a brief 2-game road trip for the Minnesota Wild. They returned home to kick off a 5-game homestand, in which it had been reported that Chuck Fletcher was going to heavily judge his team on how they do on this 5-game homestand with the upcoming trade deadline, which will be a mini topic of discussion here shortly.
Sure.
But they had the Arizona Coyotes on Thursday night at XL Energy Center to open the homestand, and after getting out to a 3-0 lead in the second period, the Minnesota Wild cough up a 3-0 lead and lose 4-3 in overtime to the last place Arizona Coyotes. Nick Cousins had 2 goals. Something called Nick Cousins had 2 goals. Clayton Keller with an absolute snipe in the overtime to win it for Arizona. Coming out of that game, kind of had a helpless feeling, and I vented a little bit, maybe too harshly, on the YouTube recap, where I just kind of suggested maybe it is time to have a major shakeup of this team. But again, we'll get into that in a little bit.
Yeah, I vented too. I wrote an article about how You can't trust this team, and it goes kind of in line with what I was talking about, where you don't know. You don't know what this team is going to do on any given night. You don't know what to expect from this team. You think they're unbeatable at home and terrible on the road, and then they completely flip the script, and they beat a good playoff team in their own building, and crap the bed to epic levels against the worst team in the West.
There's a lot of crap in that bed.
Oh man, there's mattress stuffing, and then there's that. So it doesn't make any sense, and that's kind of, my frustration wasn't with that loss in particular. I mean, that's what triggered it, but it was more just with the unpredictability of this team and how you don't know what you're getting out of this team on a night-to-night basis. You don't know what you're getting out of this team on a period-by-period basis, and that's insanely frustrating as a fan. Like, sure, sports are unpredictable, and that's why we love them, but at some point you have to have some kind of identity to a team that you can cling to, and right now the only identity of this team is that it is a glaring lack of identity, and that's their identity. And so it makes it very hard to watch when it's just, it's so volatile on a night-to-night basis.
Yes, volatile. Always how I feel after a loss like that. And to close out the week, Minnesota Wild hosted the Chicago Blackhawks in what was viewed as a must-win game for the Chicago Blackhawks. And 3-0 later, the Minnesota Wild are victorious over the Blackhawks in a game in which Chicago heavily dominated the shot counter, but as noted, after the Blackhawks had a lot more perimeter shots, they weren't getting good looks at the net, and they kind of looked disinterested to a point. So a back-breaking loss for the Blackhawks that now puts them 10 points out of a playoff spot as they trail the Minnesota Wild by 10 points in the Western Conference standings. And coming out of the week, the Minnesota Wild are still holders of the last wildcard spot in the West. They now are 2 points up of the Calgary Flames and Anaheim Ducks, 4 points up on the Colorado Avalanche for that spot, as the Avs are starting to sink a little bit without Nathan MacKinnon.
Oh, yeah.
So, good, not good, but decent week standings-wise for the Wild. They, by a point, strengthen their position. And they seemingly finally put the nail in the coffin for the Chicago Blackhawks, much to the love of everyone in the hockey universe, except for poor Mark Lazarus, who took the brunt of that on Twitter.com Saturday night, who went on an epic rant.
Yeah, that if you haven't seen it yet, the rant by Lazarus was very good, and it was kind of, emblematic of every sports team. I feel like we just went through it with Vikings Twitter and the absolute dumpster fire that is 365 days a year. And the Wild Twitter can get that way at times as well, but Twitter is a place of extremes, and certainly you can say a lot of things on there without any kind of repercussions, so people are going to. They're going to act ridiculous, and I even act ridiculous at times in more of an ironic manner, but it just it really brings out the worst in sports fans, I feel like, and Lazarus has kind of had enough of it, and God, I can't say that I blame him. There's the point that he made 3 cups in 9 years. Shut up,
That poor man, and all the bandwagoners in his mentions.
All the people who have never heard of Eric Daze or Chris Chelios.
Who's Doug Gilmour?
Right. Heard of Ed Belfour.
So, on to the news of the week. There was a little bit newsworthy a week for the Minnesota Wild. First of which comes after the Tuesday game. It was revealed Jonas Brodin will be out 3 to 4 weeks after undergoing a procedure on his left hand after he fractured it in the win over the Blues, as noted by yours truly on Twitter.com Tuesday night.
Yeah, you called that right away.
Yeah, I was quite good at finding it this week, finding the injuries.
Yeah, I got asked by our friends at the Committed Indian about how severe Brodin's injury is for the Wild, and yeah, obviously it's something you don't want to see, but I think this team is well poised to absorb it right now. We'll get into the trade later, but I think that, with Gustav Olofsson and Mike Riley kind of flip-flopping back and forth, I think that having Olofsson play second line or second pair with Dumba isn't the worst thing in the world. And yeah, Brodin had been better lately, but let's be honest, Brodin has been having a brutal year. And so are they going to miss him? Well, sure. I mean, anytime you lose a player, you're going to miss that depth. And, we're one Mike Riley faux pas away from, I'm sure, a Twitter meltdown about how much this team misses Brodin. But I think they can absorb it for a little while. I think that as far as injuries go, I'd rather lose a Brodin than a Nino or a Granlund or, obviously one of the, or Spurgeon. I mean, we had a scare last night with Spurgeon. I'd lose 2 Brodins before I'd lose 1 Spurgeon. So that's just kind of where I'm at.
When you have Jonas Brodin light in your lineup with Gustav Olofsson.
Exactly.
Don't get me wrong, as much as everyone seems to love Brodin's defensive game, you're going to be just fine with Gustav Olofsson filling his shoes. And I'm not as worried about the loss as we were with Jared Spurgeon on Saturday against Chicago, and thankfully that only lasted a half a period. But it still is not good, but I kind of look at it in a maybe glass half full kind of way. It gives Gustav Olofsson, Mike Riley a chance to shine, and as we'll get into in a minute, it gives other guys from Iowa maybe a chance to get a look here on the roster, and it's also good to maybe showcase some of these players who could be part of a potential trade here as we inch closer to the NHL trade deadline.
Right, and not underrated. I mean, let's not forget that even if you like Jonas Brodin, and even if you like Matt Dumba, their chemistry together has been pretty awful. And they've really struggled as a unit. They've been much better separately. So, I don't know. It just, I don't want to say blessing in disguise right off the bat necessarily, but again, I think this team can absorb this, and I really don't want to see this used as an excuse, is kind of the main point, is you really can't play this card as, well, no wonder they didn't make the playoffs. They were without Jonas Brodin for 6 weeks. I mean, I'm not buying that if they're selling it.
Brodin and Dumba have been better lately, and it wasn't to the tire fire effects we saw in the first part of the season, but I don't know, I think as I got into it with local radio host yesterday on Twitter, I would certainly like to see Suter and Spurgeon split up for the better of the D pairs, but it will never seemingly come to that. Also this week, the Minnesota Wild made a minor league trade as they acquired defenseman Victor Louvre from the New Jersey Devils organization. He was playing for Binghamton of the AHL in exchange for Christoph Berchi and former second-round pick Mario Lucia, in which certainly everyone made the headline of their story. Don Lucia's son Mario traded from Minnesota Wild to New Jersey Devils. As I said on Twitter following the trade, it was a little bit disappointing considering Lucia was a second-round pick, and if you remember, they actually traded up into the second round to get Mario Lucia in that draft, and he just really never panned out. But it is not surprising at this point because he really never could get above the bottom 6 in Iowa this season. And with all the good performers in Iowa, you could argue that maybe there wasn't really a big chance for him, but he did have 2.5 seasons to kind of make his case to be in that top 6 in Iowa, so he never really panned up for that, and it gives him kind of a fresh start.
Yeah, I think a change of scenery is probably due for him, just because, like you said, I mean, it's not like the Wild didn't give him an opportunity. It'd be one thing if you could cry foul in that, they buried him on the bench or whatever, but he played in Iowa. He played a lot, and he just never really developed into any kind of scorer that they were really hoping for when they took him in the second round. So certainly disappointing because, like you said, you traded some assets to pick him, but at the end of the day, they felt like they needed a little bit more defensive depth, and it's kind of hard to argue with that when they keep on resurrecting the ghost of Nate Prosser every season. So it's understandable. I mean, Louvre is a left shot defenseman, which isn't ideal, I guess, but it also does free them up to trade an Olofsson or a Riley, as you alluded to before. I mean, if you're going to showcase these guys, and those are guys that have a little bit more talent, and you think that maybe Louvre could be a third pair guy, whereas maybe Olofsson and Riley at their peak are second pair guys, and you can move some things around, move some money around with Olofsson or Riley, then maybe that's another reason for the move.
And the other underlying part of this move was it gets the Wild down to 49 contracts. The limit is 50, and pretty much guaranteeing that 50th contract to be Jordan Greenway, either after the Olympics or following the end of Boston season, and they're not doing overly great, so it could be sooner than later following the conclusion of the Olympic Games here in February.
Yeah, I got to imagine they gave away Christoph Berchi almost for free. Really, Lucia was a buy low for the Devils, and I don't know much about Louvre, to be honest, but I'm assuming he's, like I said, maybe a serviceable third pair guy at best, but you got to think they just basically, the Devils did the Wild a solid, essentially, by taking Berchi off their hands and freeing up a contract spot.
I mean, he's 25, and he kind of is what he is at this point, and
yep.
He might bring you maybe a tad more offense than Jonas Brodin, but that's assuming you give him the time to play, and
right.
It's more to just add a body in Iowa, and we'll get into that a little later as well. But other news this week as we rapidly approach the trade deadline, which is now just
2 weeks
two weeks out. Wow, getting really close here.
Less than that.
The rumors are becoming hot and heavy, and as Pierre LeBrun of The Athletic first noted, and was followed up by Michael Russo of The Athletic the next day, that the Minnesota Wild still maybe looking to add, not gun-shy from last year's Martin Hanzal trade, which we both will still die on that hill that it was a good trade to make.
LeBrun said the same thing today.
Yeah.
He said he would 100% defend Fletcher on that deal, because if he didn't make the deal, he would have been possibly fricasseed even harder.
Right,
so, which he's right.
People always forget that the Chicago Blackhawks were also rumored to be on Martin Hanzal, and you kind of make that trade and you take Hanzal away from a division rival, and it's very similar to what LeBrun pointed out as the Capitals did with Kevin Shattenkirk, took him away from perhaps another playoff contender that they didn't want him to go to, and neither really panned out, but
right.
It's all part of the giant game of chess that the NHL general managers have to play every day. But as Ed pointed out, the Wild apparently looking to add. LeBrun pointed out a scoring winger, which makes a lot of sense because they are not getting a lot of scoring from their bottom six wingers. And Nino Niederreiter constantly in and out of the lineup with injury. Makes pretty clear sense, but if you look at the TSN trade bait list, I just don't know who you go get without having to give up more valuable assets on this roster.
That's
really
kind of
just
what, yeah.
doesn't make a lot. And if you don't want to part with your first-round pick or your 4 prized prospects in Greenway, Kaprizov, Cunnin, or Eriksson Ek, what realistically can you give up to get some kind of depth scoring winger?
Yeah, that's exactly what they talked about today, and it's exactly what we've talked about too. We did the zone coverage roundtable where we talked about what kind of moves they can make at the deadline, and quite honestly, it doesn't make a lot of sense for them to deal a pick or a prospect because they can't get rid of any money in a deal like that. So while keeping their farm intact, I'm sure, is a priority, rest assured, Chuck Fletcher is not afraid of trading draft picks or prospects. But the problem is they can't trade one because that doesn't take any money off the books.
No.
And so, that's kind of, I don't know, I guess you could call it a blessing in disguise. But, as Russo said on radio this morning with LeBrun, is that it's going to have to be a dollar for dollar kind of deal because the Wild are that close to the cap, and they're going to have to get rid of some money in order to get anybody with any kind of contract in. And so you're looking at, I don't want to call it a blockbuster, but if they trade Charlie Coyle, that kind of feels like a little bit of a blockbuster, or they trade a guy like, I don't know if they'll trade Nino or Graham or anything like that. I think they just wrapped him up. But, if they make a trade with a guy like Eric Stahl, that's kind of a blockbuster. And so you have to kind of look at deals like that, and I don't think I'm alone in that it scares the bejesus out of me.
For his faults, Charlie Coyle is still a pretty good hockey player, as they hammered on Sunday Russo was hosting the 11 to 1 show on local radio, but it really has to be a good deal for Minnesota to make that move. And Charlie Coyle has a very team-friendly contract, and you hope that it's not a panic kind of a move from Chuck Fletcher as we get closer to the deadline. And, everybody is rampant with speculation right now about the Montreal Canadiens perhaps being a team the Wild could make a deal with after Marc Bergevin was at Saturday night's game. But, if you listen to Pierre LeBrun again, he says that Marc Bergevin loves to take in other games quite frequently around the league. And, if you listen to GMs after they make a trade call, they tell you that, trades take months of work. They talk to GMs, pretty much every day. For all we know, Marc Bergevin and Chuck Fletcher could just be shooting the breeze.
Sure.
Probably not, since we're pretty close to the deadline, but somebody tweets out Marc Bergevin just walks into Chuck Fletcher's box at XL Energy Center, and all of a sudden the HF boards comes to life on Twitter.com. Let's cool it here, folks. And you look at the Montreal Canadiens roster. Who do they have that you would want? And if we're being realistic, so you take away Carey Price and his abnormally large contract.
Right. Yeah, you don't even want that at this point. Pacioretty and Galchenyuk are two interesting names, and I think they're two names that could very well be dealt given the situation that the Canadiens are in. But yeah, like you said, HF boards suddenly become Skynet. Yeah, that's become self-aware.
People wonder what happened to HF boards. Well, everyone migrated onto Twitter. That's where HF boards went, folks. It's all still there. Credit to those who have stuck through HF boards for all the years, but even the Hockey Insider left at some point.
Oh God. You need to add like 5 R's to my Twitter handle.
There you go. Ben Remington. And then the other name that's been a little constant in trade talk here in the last week and change has been Matt Cullen, who, at 41 years old, he signed a 1-year deal in the summer to come play at quote-unquote home effectively and run out the final season. And now he's apparently not overly pleased with his role on the team right now, and his role is still up in the air, and he's been a healthy scratch once or twice, and Boudreau hasn't been pleased with his play, and it's rampantly speculated that the Pittsburgh Penguins could be interested in reacquiring him for another Stanley Cup run. And how are you feeling on Matt Cullen potentially getting shipped back out to the Pittsburgh Penguins?
If that's how he feels, then fine. I don't understand what he could possibly have been happy about. He signed to be the fourth-line center, and he's the fourth-line center, even moving up to third-line center more recently, a couple of games here. So I don't know what he's upset about. What did he think he was going to do? And on top of that, well, that's all nice that you're upset with your role, but here's an idea. How about you play a little better and produce? And maybe you would get in, we love Matt Cullen, and I'm not just absolutely taking a steaming dump on him or anything, but it's sorry, dude, there was a lot of talk early in the season about how bad you were. And so I don't want to hear that you're upset with your role on the team when you're playing poorly, and maybe the comeback tour to home was ill-advised or whatever, because maybe time has finally caught up with the ageless Matt Cullen, but it's I don't know what he has to be upset about. But if he's upset and the Penguins want him and he wants out, then, I don't want to say good riddance because that's a little cold, but yeah, sure, why not? You've got plenty of players in Iowa that can do what he's doing. You talked to one yesterday in Sam Annis. Luke Cunnin obviously is a huge name that's waiting in the wings, and the list goes on and on.
I'd argue that trading Matt Cullen would be an error on the Wild's part, and even though he's still trying to find his way here. I would rather them try and dump somebody else out of the bottom 6 that's not playing up to snuff. I think
that list is fairly long.
Yeah,
problem is his contract is very easily movable.
Right, and
Ennis and Foligno not so much.
I think the Wild sneak into the playoffs. I think Matt Cullen can help this team in a way that maybe they've been missing over these years.
Maybe.
He's been on so many Stanley Cup runs, and he could offer some words of wisdom to a couple of key players who seemingly can't find their way in the playoffs, and that helps the Wild maybe win a round or two. It felt like that was why you brought him here, and he's now the oldest player in the NHL. To give up on that experiment, I would be a little bit disappointed. Like you said, I'd understand moving him because his contract is so easily movable, and the Penguins seemingly want Dad back for one more Stanley Cup run, but I would think it would be a mistake on their part to move on from him at the deadline. So
no, that's fair. That's fair.
Other newsworthy things here this week. Not Matt Cullen. We just talked about him. The other Matt on this team, Matt Dumba, scored against the St. Louis Blues. His 10th goal of the season. That is the third season in a row Matt Dumba has scored 10 or more goals. And as I noted, he is the first player in the history of the Minnesota Wild. The first defenseman in the history of the Minnesota Wild to score 10-plus goals in 3 straight seasons. Actually, in just 3 seasons alone. Not let alone 3 in a row. Jared Spurgeon also has a chance to do that this year if he can hit the 10 mark, as he will also have done it 3 years in a row.
Gotcha.
But Brent Burns did not do that. Marek Zidlicki did not do that.
Nick Schultz certainly never did that.
Nick Schultz never hit 5 or more in 3 in a row, let's be honest.
Right.
Yeah,
Kuba?
so
No.
Feel free to send in your Matt Dumba apologies, folks.
Yeah, no kidding, right? It turns out it was the season of Dumba after all. It just started a little bit later.
I'm still going to be doing that all year, so don't think that's going away anytime soon.
And I called him to score 50 points this year. I don't know that he's going to reach that lofty of a goal, but he's certainly probably going to get into the 40s, and that's pretty solid for a defender.
That's very good. I mean, he's also top 5 in the NHL in defensemen in goals scored. I mean, he was, at the time that I noted that on Wednesday, he was only trailing PK Subban, and I want to say it was Zach Werenski of the Columbus Blue Jackets, and he was tied with, I can't remember who he was tied with. It was Gostisbehere was one, and then I want to say Ekblad was the other, but I could be wrong. But either way, like top 5 in defensemen and goal scorer on the season is a very noticeable thing for Matt Dumba, and he's certainly doing quite well. He's up to 31 points, and he might just get on the fringe of 50. He might end in the 47, which has come with the offenseless Jonas Brodin.
Hey, this is Nate Wells.
And this is Drew Cove.
Check out our podcast, that Go for Hockey podcast, for the latest news and updates on University of Minnesota hockey. You can find us on iTunes, and we're also on the Zone Coverage Podcast Network.
That's elite.
Some more Iowa Wild news this week as old pal Ryan White finds his way back into the organization. White signing a AHL contract with the Iowa Wild on Thursday after being released by the San Diego Gulls, the Anaheim Ducks AHL affiliate, on Wednesday. And Ryan White took part in both Iowa games Friday and Saturday after signing so quickly. Ben, Ryan White is back. Your thoughts?
I don't know. We talked about it earlier, and he's an AHL guy at this point, and I don't think he's going to sniff the NHL, at least for the Wild this season. So, I mean, whatever. They had to replace some bodies to replace. They had to get some bodies to replace Lucia and Verci. So, I don't know. I mean, Ryan White qualifies as a warm body, I guess.
Yeah, Derek Lalonde had some nice things to say about him. Kind of coach speak to pick up the player after probably not feeling too good about playing for now his 4th organization here just this season alone, as he's had stops with Vancouver, Boston, and the Anaheim organization. And it's like you said, it's just a body, and they needed one, and it's not eating at their contract limit of 50, so I don't think we need to get too worked up about it. And
no,
hopefully he can not mess up what they have going in Iowa. They got a good thing going right now, and we'll see what happens, but I guess it's not something to get overly too upset about. So we'll see what happens, I guess.
No, and the poor bastard did go from San Diego to Des Moines. So, like any angst that you have towards Ryan White, you have to kind of mix it with a little bit of empathy for that.
Yeah. Goes from it's warm to it's snowing.
Well, on the bright side, I'm sure he'll love the scenic parts of Europe he sees next year.
So looking ahead to this week, Minnesota Wild continue on their homestand. They play the New York Rangers Tuesday, the now rebuilding New York Rangers on Tuesday. And they coming off a win against the Winnipeg Jets on Sunday, the New York Rangers, but seemingly all systems go in the front office on a rebuild, as names like Rick Nash, Michael Grabner, and even Ryan McDonough seemingly up for grabs at the trade deadline this year. So not a whole lot to expect from the Rangers, although probably a good effort because everyone on the squad probably looking to get traded.
Yeah, no, it's tough. They've won the last 3 games, I believe, or 2 games since that infamous letter came out. So I don't know. It's kind of a cornered animals type situation. So I'm not penciling that one into the win column just yet.
An open letter, if you will.
Nothing gets done like open letters.
Moving right along, Thursday, the Wild play Washington Capitals, Metropolitan Division leading Washington Capitals at XL Energy Center. As always, expect a fine night from number 8, as he always roasts the Wild, especially on the power play where the Wild seemingly don't ever acknowledge his existence. And then to close out the week and the 5-game homestand, the Wild play the Anaheim Ducks on Saturday in a lovely Saturday matinee.
Woo!
Gotta love those Saturday matinees.
Oh, man, you can do so much drinking afterwards.
Yeah, I've certainly never done that before. All right, that is the week ahead for the Minnesota Wild. Since we kind of briefly hit on it in the topics du jour here, we can kind of get to our listener question right now. We did throw it out to our listeners. What would they like to see the Wild do at the trade deadline? Buy, sell, stand pat. Kind of gave everyone the chance to chime in, and we did get some solid answers here.
Yeah.
First of which comes from our friend Panda Pete. He says, trade everyone. Very reasonable.
I like that strategy.
Justin Banks says, no, the Wild should not trade for Rick Nash.
I would agree.
Our friend Tony from Hockey Wilderness says, can't imagine who they find that's on the cheap, won't cost at first. I'm uninformed, but don't think they'll want to throw in a Cunnin, Kaprizov, or Greenway.
You know who they can find on the cheap? Ryan White.
Don't you hate pants?
Bob Spencer says, trade Brodin.
Well, damaged goods now.
David says, fire Koivu, trade Boudreau, give Fletcher the C, rabble, rabble, rabble.
Yeah, I kind of like this line of thinking. It's kind of like a, like the full chaos, full anarchy type ideal.
Here's a sensible idea from Dan. If they could get good players by trading bad players while remaining under the cap, I'd say do it. But if they can't, then ride in the streets and burn Burger Mo's to the ground.
I love Dan's beef with Burger Mo's, and not that it's not unwarranted, but I just love it when people have ridiculous beefs with, like, food establishments and or other inanimate objects.
Like an inanimate carbon rod?
Yes. Or any of one of the beefs that I have surrounding Wild fan behavior.
Serious mashup. He chimes in, as always, hockey trade for Michael Grabner with the Austrian flag next to it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess that's a possibility considering the Rangers are looking to, ship out everything that isn't nailed down. But
Kelly Riley, sell everything they can to acquire picks and prospects. That sounds like a rebuild, so unless we get a letter tweeted out from Chuck Fletcher and Craig Leopold, I don't expect that.
Yeah, and as I said before, the letter would finish with Chuck Fletcher saying, "Oh, and by the way, I've been fired." So, deuces.
Argon Beast says, I'm thinking a player swap, Coyle for blank. Probably looking younger with higher scoring potential. That would be my guess.
I like this blank guy. Can we find out more about him?
Yeah, I'll have to look him up on Hockey Reference.
Yes, we'll have to look it up. It's this younger, faster, better scoring blank fellow.
Jesse D. St. Hubert, Coyle plus Buffalo's third round pick to Montreal for Galchenyuk. Habs retain $500,000 for a year. Wild get a potential game breaker, and Habs get two-way center to replace Plekanec.
Yeah, I kind of liked this one a little bit. It's certainly an interesting move. It's certainly a shakeup. I don't know how much. I mean, I'm not a Galchenyuk hater by any stretch, but I don't know if that really turns anything around for the Wild. It just seems like reshuffling deck chairs.
Looks like Remy Dog. Is this your alternate Twitter?
No, that's the burner account for my dog, actually.
Brock has a Twitter account?
Yes, he likes to stealthily make fun of people.
Gotcha. He says, this team is hot garbage and lacked chemistry and defensive structure at the beginning of the year. Seems they have finally clicked. I guess I'd be happier staying put, barring the wheels falling off the bus, starting next game until trade deadline. Worth noting, he tweeted this hours before the Arizona Coyotes game.
I wonder how that tweet would change after the game.
Be interested to see how he felt after the game.
Yeah, I think he would have a totally different saying about the wheels in the bus at that point.
Bob Spencer again, trade Nate Prosser for Erik Karlsson. Very, very good hockey trade right there, in my opinion.
Right, I mean, if Craig Leopold slips Eugene Melnyk a check, nothing's impossible.
Here, Eugene, here's a few million. Here you go.
It's Nate Prosser in cash considerations, our old friend, for Erik Karlsson.
There you go. Tim Babini says, bye. They still don't really have a sniper that can take some of the attention away from the better shooters on this team.
Yeah, all the shooters on the Wild. All of them.
None of them.
Yes. Does Matt Dumba count?
If they did one of those like All-Star Game skills competition, who do you think would win the accuracy contest?
Koivu with his backhand? No. You gotta think that like Parise or Suter, because like they're skilled. They're not game breakers or anything, but I think that when it comes to just, like putting the puck where they want it, Granlund maybe.
God, that's difficult. I'd say I'm gonna go with Dumba. You said it earlier.
Yeah, he's harder shot. I don't know how accurate though. I mean, that's possible, I guess. Ray Bourque was a god at it.
Yeah. Oh. Last one, Series Mashup says, trade Coyle for a first rounder.
Okay.
That would seem to be more of a concession on the season than anything.
Right. I don't know how Series Mashup developed a vendetta against the Big Omelet, but...
Well, we certainly love him here still.
We do.
All right, on to our Bruce Boudreau quote of the week.
Hi, this is Bruce Boudreau. I don't see how in Toronto that they're calling it, unless it's a guy they just pulled in off the street that hasn't seen hockey before.
If I were the fans, I'd be booing even more, because they pay good money for this.
If you want it, don't just think you want it. Go out and f***ing want it.
So we have two Bruce Boudreau quotes of the week. First of which came last Monday. Bruce Boudreau commenting after practice on the Super Bowl, which we're going to get to in a little bit. But he commented on Minnesota when he said, the state of Minnesota did themselves proud. I wish they would have mentioned St. Paul a little bit more. They always talked about Minneapolis. I think St. Paul is proud of the things they did for the Super Bowl. I'm pretty proud to be living here. Bruce, good on you for sticking up for St. Paul. Us St. Paulers have to stick together.
Yeah. So there was a tweet that came out about St. Paul being a neighborhood of Minneapolis. Like, I don't know. I think it was CNN that screwed it up as usual or something, which is, a joke. And then obviously some douche canoe from Minneapolis is like, oh yeah, they're twins. Like, Schwarzenegger and Danny DeVito were twins. And so, we tweeted out, that's the kind of arrogance that makes Minneapolis suck. But, then I thought about it. It's actually a pretty good analogy because Danny DeVito, while small and, certainly not a looker, he's very underrated in his acting prowess and his comedy skills. I mean, he goes from doing, terrible movies like that, like Twins with Schwarzenegger, to being, the Penguin, which was, I don't want to call it an iconic role, but I think he did a fairly good job for what the dark, weird stuff that Tim Burton was going for. And then into, a great character on It's Always Sunny. And I don't know, I kind of like that. Whereas Minneapolis, it's Schwarzenegger. It's a lot of arrogance. It's a lot of superficial garbage and, a lot of, let's just say, shady stuff going on.
Yeah, no, that's dead on. I never thought I would hear Danny DeVito be used in an analogy to St. Paul in a positive light, but here we are.
We will take him as our mascot because St. Paul is cool like that.
Danny DeVito is St. Paul. My call.
Yes.
All right. Moving right along here on the Giles and the Goalie podcast. The second quote of Bruce Boudreau's Quote of the Week came most recently on Sunday when he met with the media after the outdoor practice that they had in St. Louis Park, which was quite cold, as some beat writers pointed out today.
Poor Dane.
As he was looking through some quotes, he found this one from Boudreau, as he says, "The whistle was tough. If I would have kept it in my mouth any longer, it would have stuck, and I don't think the players would have given me any pity for that."
Yeah, I appreciate his old school gumption of sticking with the metal whistle, but, I mean, as a hockey coach, you just got to know better than that, right? Like, you got to go with the plastic one. That's pretty fundamental coaching stuff.
It's probably left over from his Anaheim days when he didn't have to worry about this.
Yeah, I suppose. Or outdoor practices.
True. So yeah, that is the Bruce Boudreau Quotes of the Week. And now on to our weekly wager.
What's your bet, sir?
Ah, yes, the bet. Okay, what the hell? It makes very little sense to bet when you cannot win.
So as you may remember, last week, Ben and I placed a wager on Super Bowl 52, which was here in lovely Minneapolis, Minnesota, a neighbor of the capital city, St. Paul. And Ben took the New England Patriots. I took the Philadelphia Eagles. And had the Patriots won, I would have had to list 10 things I like about the state of Iowa. And if the Eagles win, Ben has to say 10 nice things about the Minnesota Vikings. Well, the Philadelphia Eagles, thanks to Nick freaking Foles, won the Super Bowl. And now we get to hear Ben Remington list 10 positive things about the franchise he loathes above all others, the Minnesota Vikings.
Okay. All right. So, number one, they have had good uniforms except for the Reebok years, which I think is fair.
Yes, fair.
Yes. Number two, they had Brock Lesnar, which I am a fan of, so appreciate that.
Yeah, for all of 2 weeks.
Right, yeah. I mean, remember the good times. Number three, simply put, Randy Moss, Hall of Famer Randy Moss. Number four, for as hideously ugly as it is on the outside, I have heard US Bank Stadium is very nice on the inside.
Can confirm.
Even if it's filled by idiots, it's very nice on the inside. Number five, Miss Lippy's car is green. Okay. No, the number 5. Vikings Twitter is somewhat avoidable, so that's a plus. I mean, like I said, you and I see the outskirts of Vikings Twitter, as it will, because we follow, some of our fellow writers at Zone Coverage, and
we follow sensible people.
We're right, yeah. So we see the madness that they go through, the Twitter spats that they get into with your various Kevins and whatnot. Yeah, but luckily you can kind of stay out of it. I've only been sucked into Vikings Twitter like one time, and it sucked. But for the most part, you can kind of stay out of there, so that's good.
You never want Vikings Avi Twitter in your mentions. They got
no. I don't know how they do it.
They got
poor Reefus on
Vikings in their photos, and then usually in their Twitter bio is some form of Bible verse, which can only mean the worst is about to come upon your Twitter feed.
Or some kind of compound word involving skull.
Oh yes. Speaking of skull,
what?
That's got to be on your list, right?
No. So number 6, their fans aren't quite as bad as Packer fans, which I think is a fair statement.
Yeah, Vikings fans are just awful in the fact that they're self-loathing, whereas Packers Twitter is awful in the fact that they think their you-know-what doesn't stink, and they are genuinely awful. Like, Vikings Twitter is awful, but Packers Twitter is 50 steps higher up on the awful scale.
But it does give us the wondrous amusement that is JS Comments.
This is true. I love
JS Comments is amazing.
Twitter would be a much darker place without JS Comments.
Yeah. Number 7, they won me a weekly wager.
That's true.
Which, as Giles will remember, I literally needed a miracle to win this weekly wager, but I won.
Minneapolis Miracle.
Yes. I think was that a beer? You owe me a beer for that?
Yeah, I have to get that at some point.
Yeah, that's right.
After the dry month.
Right. Number 8, they're the most entertaining team in Minnesota, off the field.
Gotta love the love boat.
Yeah, I don't think there's any really debate there. I mean, when it comes down to Wizenators and Alan Alma's Minnetonka boat tours and God, what else? Cord Robinson doing 125 miles an hour drunk through Mankato, that kind of stuff. I mean, that was quality entertainment. Mike Zimmer's kind of put a stop to it, but that was quality entertainment.
There's never a dull moment with that franchise.
Right.
Literally.
Number 9, and I really think that they've done the sports world a huge service. They started the legendary Foles chant. They stole it shamelessly from Iceland, and the Philadelphia Eagles fans were able to adopt it as their own, celebrating Super Bowl MVP Nick Foles.
Man, I'd hate for Wolf Stanson to show up from Iceland knocking on their door going, "You stole our chant."
At least give Wolf Stanson royalties. All right, and then finally number 10, I think you'll really enjoy this one. They make Paul Allen's life even more miserable than it already is.
No!
I enjoyed writing that one way too much.
Yeah, I'm surprised that wasn't all 10 on this list.
But I mean, honest to God, like, that guy is so terrible that it makes me a little happy inside that this team, like, literally ruins his life every season. Like, they make him a miserable, sobbing shell of a man multiple times in the year.
Remember when his pregame tweet, the Eagles game, did not age well in the next 4 hours?
He tweeted it and said it aged like a sliced avocado. Yeah, and Charlie, our friend Charlie, was he was incredulous by it being a play-by-play guy himself, and I don't blame him because, like, Paul Allen cut like a wrestling promo on Nick Foles. And I get that there's no illusion of objectivity anymore, but Jesus Christ, and it wasn't even good. It was just corny, stupid, vague threats about how good the Vikings defense was, which, wow, that did, yeah, as you said, Not only did that not age well, that was like some Wile E. Coyote blowing up in his face shit.
Yep. Literally.
Yeah. So yeah, there's my 10 nice things about the Vikings.
Just to tease my nice Iowa list, I would have had number 1. Des Moines is actually a pretty nice city. If you find the right places to go, it's actually not a bad town. And part of the reason why I keep going down to cover the Iowa Wild is Des Moines is actually quite nice, so it's not all bad. I'll save the rest for a different time because I'm sure I'm going to need this list again. We'll make some kind of egregious bet that'll involve a list, and I'll find something else that you hate, and hopefully I win that bet again, so you have to make the list.
Yeah, I think, it'll come eventually. It'll come for you.
Well, we'll see. All right, this week's wager on Thursday at some time, probably early in the morning, we will get the United States and Canada women's Olympic hockey teams battling on the round-robin part of the tournament. Always a heated affair when these two teams meet, and they met, it had to have been 6 or 7 times in their pre-Olympic tour. One of the stops which came here in St. Paul, and we have decided to wager on this game, so one of us has to take the Canadian side of things, and that will be me this time around. I will go with Team Canada. Ben is staying true to his American heritage and goes with Team USA.
Yeah, well, I am a proud red-blooded American, and I'm sticking with my proud country.
So the wager on this is if Canada wins, Ben is going to eat a bag of ketchup chips, if I can find them.
Ugh.
And then the backup for that, if I am unable to find some ketchup chips and get them here in time, is I will make a list of 10 nice things about Canada, because sitting here I only have about 3. So it'll be a challenge to come up with 10.
There are not many.
But if team... Wait, did I get it all?
Yeah, no, that was everything.
Okay.
And then if the U.S. wins, then you will have to write a paragraph in apology for expatriating yourself to the beautiful, talented, and very skilled U.S. women's hockey team.
I'll send them my apology in the mail. Hopefully it makes it to South Korea by the time, or while they're still there.
Right.
So there you go. That is the weekly wager for this week. Do check out our Twitter feed at GATG Wild Podcast, where we update the weekly wager tally after the bet has been decided. Ben and I are currently tied at 7 this year, and then obviously we have the outstanding bet on the season with the Minnesota Timberwolves making the playoffs and getting very, very close to me eating some slaw. So
yes,
you can probably
very
look
much
forward
looking
to
forward to that.
You can look forward to that in mid-April when we're loathing about the Wild.
Yeah, that sounds good.
So, all right. Last but not least, our favorite segment, jerseys.
Here to start the third period. What team is this? It's not Team USA. Well, yes, it is. They've got on new uniforms. They're wearing the logo of the Duck. I've never seen this before.
Team of the week, Washington Capitals, as they're playing the Wild on Thursday. Ben and I obviously have made our thoughts on their jerseys well known. Obviously, one of my favorite Twitter bits has not been able to take place this season, where I tweet at the Washington Capitals when they wear their third jerseys to please wear them permanently, because they had to retire those this year, obviously. Ben and I also making it very well aware that we are disappointed Washington really didn't make more of a change to their uniforms with the Adidas switch. With that said, looking at a third jersey, Ben, what are you thinking of?
Well, I guess, going with the throwbacks would be the easy way to go, and probably the best way to go, quite honestly. The throwbacks are just outstanding, and it's really a shame that they took that bit away from you this season by getting rid of them, because they even sent out a season ticket holder survey asking people what they liked, and I can't for the life of me imagine their season ticket holders saying, yes, we don't want to see the throwbacks next year.
I should have set up some kind of a bot that just kept hitting that survey so it would run up the score.
So yeah, I don't know. I gotta think they go with the throwbacks in some way, shape, or form. But if they don't, and we talked about this around their Winter Classic jerseys, which are horrendous, I'd like to see something incorporating their 90s logos back. Like, they had the Eagle logo. I think it's probably a little dated now, but they could update that. They could update the logo with the capital and the hockey sticks. They could use those in some way, shape, or form, I think, in conjunction with their current color scheme and their current kind of jersey layout. And I think there's some potential there, if they're not going to go with the throwbacks, which would obviously be my first choice.
That's not a bad thought. Like, obviously, you and I are very favorable to 90s jerseys, so I'm not opposed to the Eagle coming back. But
yeah, there's no teal, that's all.
I think, as I said, when the Capitals Stadium Series jerseys were unveiled, I was disappointed that the crest wasn't their alternate logo with the Eagle with the Capitol Dome in the bottom there.
Sure.
So that would obviously be the starting point on my third jersey idea, since I'm not going to just say, yeah, go back to the throwbacks.
Mm-hmm.
I take the base and a navy blue color of their Stadium Series jerseys. Mm-hmm. I would lower the red stripe on the bottom of the jersey, make it from a third of the jersey to just a little stripe down there that's red.
Sure.
Put some white shoulders on it, and then I'd try to make a little variation of the throwbacks and put the stars on the sleeves right under the number, have white shoulders, and have the matching stripes on the arms, and that'd be a solid look.
Yeah, I think it would.
It kind of mixes the old with the new, and that's the kind of innovation that you'd hope somebody in the NHL would pay somebody like us to do that, but nope.
Think of all the templates we could come up with and submit to that team, and how good they would look.
The NHL paid somebody at Adidas to come up with toilet seat cover collars.
Oh, God, the Blackhawks look so bad.
Yep, the Blackhawks are literally example one of toilet seat cover.
Yeah, they're the worst.
So, yeah, that is our jersey thoughts. I think we got all of it. We could sit here and talk about the Capitals' jersey history because it is rather good. So,
it is.
But we have done that many a times in the past, so we will not go much longer here again. So that can probably wrap it up for us. Thank you to everyone for listening through this week's show. We hope you enjoyed our conversation, particularly around the trade deadline. Do stay tuned here in the next couple of weeks. We are going to continue to bring the trade deadline conversation, and we will have in 2 weeks, we will have a podcast right after the trade deadline has ended. So we will hold from Monday morning release, and we'll make it kind of Monday evening there, right after the trade deadline, so we can get all the news in there that we possibly can. So do look for that here in the coming weeks. Hopefully we can wrangle up some guests to join this otherwise fine podcast. They're always good to get some other people's voices on here with us. But you can find Ben and I on Twitter at Ben Remington, at Giles Farrell. You can find our podcast on Twitter at GATG Wild Podcast. You can find us on Facebook, facebook.com/GATG Wild Podcast. And you can listen to the show pretty much anywhere, mainly SoundCloud. Do check us out there. We are on iTunes. If you listen to us via iTunes, please drop us a rating. It really goes a long way in getting the show further up the iTunes charts. We are on YouTube. Go to YouTube, search Giles and the Goalie. We do recaps, previews, and all our podcasts are there as well. And then Google Play, Stitcher, I'm forgetting something, but iHeart. There it is. iHeartRadio. We are also there. Do check us out there. Go to iHeart.com, search Giles and the Goalie. Ben and I write for a website called Zone Coverage. You can find that at zonecoverage.com if you are looking for hockey specifically. Zonecoverage.com/wild, where you can find Ben and I's written works from pretty much last January until now. And you can find all of our podcasts there as well, zonecoverage.com/wild. So that will do it for us, and we will chat with you again next week.
Later.
It's not resiliency. You're making it sound like we're good. That's all. I'm done.